Welcome to Green Noise, a podcast series from CapeNature that is bringing nature to life, and we use white noise to try to sleep better, but green noise to make life better.
You're as high as Victoria Falls at some.
Don't take that out of context about the penguins in ICU.
We basically give penguins medical aid.
Welcome to Green Noise, a podcast series from CapeNature that brings nature's voices to life and is a bold, loud, powerful platform to celebrate and champion nature, biodiversity, conservation, ecotourism, and just the glory and the beauty of CapeNature and its work and its associated partners around the reserves of the Cape. We are thrilled to be having this episode of the Green Noise series in World Tourism Month, which the global theme is tourism and peace. And I'm delighted to welcome two people who know plenty about tourism and its potential for celebrating and sharing the stories of many communities around the world in places where there have been division and struggle, and allowing people the space to learn and better understand each other as we try to foster, particularly in this country, reconciliation, peace, and celebration of everybody who is South African and makes up South Africa, which is why I'm delighted to welcome firstly Edith Henn, who is the Stakeholder and Access Manager at CapeNature, and I've heard a boss. Hello, boss. How are you? Are you good?
I'm very well. Thank you, Dan. It's nice to be here.
You're being so nice to me. You were so much less nervous off mic. But this will go super great. And I'm also thrilled to welcome the Director of Tourism and at the Department of Economic Development and Tourism for the Western Cape Government. A wonderful person too. Jacques Stoltz is here. How are you?
Good. Thank you. And thank you for the privilege of being in Kogelberg.
It's so beautiful. So one of the wonderful parts of the Green Noise podcast, if you are listening to it rather than watching some of the video releases, is that we are in one of our gorgeous, iconic CapeNature nature reserves. It's a beautiful sunny day in Kogelberg as we talk about World Tourism Month and tourism and peace in particular. And I want to start there with Edith. What comes to mind when you think about the potential for tourism to be a way of storytelling, understanding each other, having communities tell their own stories and be heard and celebrated in a country where in particular we've still got a long way to go in terms of reconciliation, rebuilding and recovery from the legacy of apartheid?
Dan, I want to say that our protected areas is from mountainous areas to the coast. And we know that historically our people have a connection to the mountains, especially to the caves in the protected areas that we manage. For example, Stadshal Cave in the Cedarburg. Communities have a connection to that cave. So we do get the odd request from indigenous groups to go and practice their historical and cultural religion activities there, and then we do allow that to happen because obviously we can't disconnect communities from the protected areas. And as we know that historically for ages there were people living in those caves. And the same happened with our caves, and I'm focusing on caves now. Klipgat Cave in the Kelders in Hermanus, there also is a lot of history. Proof has been found that people have lived in that caves. And so what we do is to not distance the two conservation and these protected areas that we manage, but it's to allow the communities to have their practices, to do the storytelling in that in the caves. And that also is good for tourism, it's good for the communities because they don't feel disconnected.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've been to Klipgat Cave and it is it's like extraordinary. It's firstly so beautiful. Secondly, CapeNature's done a great job of doing the historical storytelling based on scientific research of different eras, of different kinds of human life existing in those caves. And it's really important as we think about reconciliation, we think about a country where many people were alienated and isolated and cut off from their sense of identity and belonging, to use tourism and use conservation and nature to restore people's relationships with land and space and their own identities and cultural traditions. Absolutely.
I actually agree. You know, it is important to know that who knows the story better. It's actually the communities who know the story better. And that is why it is important that we do allow communities access to those caves, to tell the story. I want to use an example. About 2 years ago at Klipgat Cave in the Kelders, we had communities there and a storyteller from the local community and learners from the school and took them back in history to what has actually happened in those caves. And I think it's an amazing experience to ensure that community stays connected to caves and the protected areas in South Africa.
Absolutely. And if you are now thinking of going to Klipgat for the first time, bring good tackies because there's some rocky walking to get to the cave and you might get a little bit wet. So don't wear your favorite socks. Jacques, thank you so much for being here. As I greeted you earlier, in your role as the Director of Tourism for a place which is so rich in people's stories and experiences, rituals, traditions, and cultures, it must be a really exciting job, actually, to have as a job being a part of and trying to be an amplifier for all of these different kinds of heritages that exist in the Cape.
Absolutely. And I think I see my job as about working with communities to enable them to tell the stories that are rooted in not only deep cultures and stories of deep time, but also with the environment.
Yeah.
So absolutely, it's a magical ability to be able to share that.
And I mean, it's all in the numbers, right? About how many people flock in from around the world to see what to us every day in the Cape and in Cape Town is very, very normal. And it is amazing to see. I'd love to hear more on this, how, particularly since COVID, tourism in the Cape has bounced back to even stronger levels than it was before COVID, and it provides so many jobs for so many people and allows so many stories to be told. What has been the specific experience in your work since COVID of the kind of, but not only international tourism, because I'm from Joburg and everybody just wants to come to Cape Town.
We've seen an incredible rebound of international tourism, but I think the good story for me has actually been how resilient domestic tourism has been. So we shouldn't just focus on international tourism. And actually, since COVID, domestic markets have done remarkably well. But if we look at international tourism, yes, we certainly seeing airport volume numbers are back, if not better than 2019 levels. But I still think there's room to grow. You know, tourism currently only contributes about 3% of provincial gross value added, which is below OECD average, our peer countries.
Sure.
So there is really room for us to grow.
That's super interesting. So for World Tourism Month, the theme is tourism and peace. And Edith, I wanted to ask you about how important it is through the work that you've done with CapeNature and seen in communities with CapeNature over the years, how important it is to pursue, practice, advocate for, educate people about conservation as part of communities, more deeply understanding themselves and other communities.
I think it's important, but to just touch on the word peace, in CapeNature's context, I think if we're creating a job, that having money also bring a certain amount of peace.
Totally.
Because you don't have to struggle, wonder where's the next meal coming from. So CapeNature in many ways try to, throughout job creation programs, and obviously it's linked to our tourism products because we at Kogelberg today, there's a lot of accommodation facilities here. So there's a lot of people working here. So it's creating jobs, it's providing financial peace, via the tourism product that we have here, but also through our education programs. So we're trying to capacitate learners in schools, we're trying to capacitate communities about why is the protected area so important. We know we can't live without the natural resources. We need water, for example, every day. We need the air that we breathe. And the more communities actually understand this and is connected to nature, the more they will value it and the more they will take care of it. It will give custodianship and ownership. Then another thing that I think that is important to mention, that we are trying to build relationships with communities through our engagement platforms. So we're giving opportunities for communities to engage on our protected area advisory committees, for example.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
We're implementing the People and Parks program and building relationships with natural resource user groups. So there's the tourism side to it, but there's also the natural resource user group side to it. And that is why some of our staff members is actually focusing on fostering those relationships, bringing them closer to nature, but also understanding that from the protected area, there's a financial benefit to them, bringing peace.
And I really liked what you said there about financial peace, but there's a raft of other different kinds of peace. Like I've, in the last few days, been lucky enough to speak with a wilderness ranger who comes from a community very, very near Kogelberg. And he gets so much fulfillment out of making sure fires don't affect communities, making sure that people have the peace of mind that they are safe in their homes. And then I've also spoken to mental health and like wellness people who say like the literal peace that you get when you get into a mountain and you experience nature in its most normal form, away from your phone and everything, is so good for you. It's so good for your mental health and well-being, and all of those little things contribute to a more peaceful and calm and just and fulfilled society.
Definitely, Dan. I just also want to, if I may mention, a project that I've been working on a couple of years ago. We had the WIP Wilderness Therapy Project, where we actually had ladies from the local community through the Department of Social Development, ladies who went through very difficult situations at home and abusive relationships, sexual trauma, actually accessing the WIP. And we used our tourism facilities to accommodate them for weekends. So because that is also bringing that peace of mind. So tourism can play a big role. In that instance, every weekend, and we looked at bookings. If it wasn't booked and it was available, we will actually get in contact with Department of Social Development and say, there's an opportunity, bring your ladies in who needs a break. And they would send in these ladies with social workers who actually take them through sessions. Nature really can heal.
That's amazing. And that's a great example of different departments with different resources within government and ad hoc added to government programs working together when they have common goals to try and help more people. And that's exactly what I want to ask you about now, Jacques, is about how you see from a government perspective the policy proposals, the policies, the kind of like budgetary supplies, the kind of like interventions that government through organizations, but specifically yours, can do to support more peace in our societies and also more sustainable development, because that will ultimately create more peace.
Firstly, I'm with the Department of Economic Development and Tourism. So for us, the primary focus is economic development and job creation. And that is the incredible thing about tourism. We've seen that since COVID, how rapidly we've been able to add jobs in the provincial economy through tourism. So currently, we estimate tourism generates in excess of 200,000 direct employment opportunities each year. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that very few sectors are able to create rural economic opportunities to the extent that tourism does. And I think that's the other beauty here, when we talk about creating opportunities, is that we can create opportunities in areas where it's really needed. And then the third thing is inclusivity, that tourism creates amazing opportunities for women, for the youth, for people with disabilities, etc., etc. So the sense of inclusion is really amazing. The ability of tourism to be inclusive is really incredible.
I find that really interesting because, so much of South Africa is defined by too few jobs, and you have to live near an urban center to get a job. And that means that for millions and millions of people who are disadvantaged by geography, right? They are living in deeply rural areas or more remote areas, far away from big roads or roads that don't have potholes. There are very, very few opportunities for economic development, for growth, for business starting, and that. How is government, and how have you seen the ability of government through proposals and again interventions and support able to help those who are trying to create tourism projects in remote communities that can bring jobs, money, development?
So our strategy is really informed by research that looks at what are our strengths, what are our competitive advantages as a destination, what are the things that are iconic to us, and certainly natural beauty, scenic landscapes, and incredible biodiversity. These are the underpinnings of our tourism economy, really. So from a policy point of view, how do we play to these strengths? And we are investing heavily in tourism infrastructure, particularly in rural communities. And certainly CapeNature is doing amazing work developing tourism infrastructure at the properties that it looks after.
Can you explain to me what tourism infrastructure is? I'm a pleb.
Sure, it's basically the infrastructure that tourists need to access a destination. So from accommodation to road signage,
Sure.
public transport, etc.
And is it also digital software kind of stuff, like
Absolutely.
a functional website, an efficient booking system, effective social media?
So it's the entire kind of ecosystem that's needed to support tourism and its ability to service the needs of the visitor.
And that sounds very interdepartmental in government as well, because it's like, hey, if you want to help a remote community or you want to make it a little bit easier to get to a Cape Nature Reserve, you need to talk to Public Works about roads and about sewage systems. You need to talk about the Department of Transport about how we could get there and all of those different things. And I also really like the idea that part of the work of tourism infrastructure, as you call it, is marketing. Because the marketing is how you get the tourists, but there are also so many jobs in marketing, from video creation to social media strategy to IT maintenance and that. It sounds really cool.
It's an important point that you raise, is that we work very closely with tourism teachers at high school level.
Yes, because I was shocked, hey? I only matriculated in 2011 and I was not offered tourism for matric. But it's becoming more and more common now.
There's something like 22,000 high school students currently doing tourism as a subject. But the point that we're trying to bring across to the learners is that tourism is much more than being a waiter at a restaurant or working front of house at a hotel. There's actually this broad range of amazing opportunities, as you say, from social media, digital media, new technology that is fundamental to tourism.
Yeah. And I mean, what I'm hearing from both of you is that for both of you, tourism is so much more than a leisure activity. It's so much more than, somebody goes and stands in some sun, which I love, by the way. That's great. But Edith, I'd like to hear from you, because you've had so many years of superb work helping kind of the relationship between communities and tourism, and the relationship between Cape Nature projects and the communities who could benefit from them the most if they had the tools to do so. Can you give me like a little example for people who are struggling to quite grasp of one or other kind of community or community project which had all of this good stuff happening in it and then something magical happened?
Can I use one of our examples, one of our
Yes,
flagship
please.
projects? It's just down the road,
Yes.
and I hope you will go pop in there later.
Yeah.
We have the On the Edge restaurant at
Saw it on
Stony
Google
Point.
Maps when I was looking for a restaurant today. We might do it.
So we've got the On the Edge restaurant at Stony Point. It's managed by the Mooi Uitzicht Community Trust.
Okay.
Cape Nature took over the management of Stony Point in 2016, and obviously there was this community who received commercial rights from the National Minister of Tourism a couple of years ago. And when we inherited this, when we took over the management of Stony Point, we obviously also inherited this project. But at that point, the trust was non-existent. There was basically nothing happening. It was a project, but the community haven't experienced any benefits yet. And then I was handed this project to see if we can make it a success. And obviously, we needed to start with capacitating people.
Had you ever run a restaurant before?
No. But I have a lot of common sense. So what happened then is that, remember, these trustees, they're general workers at the municipality. They're working in guest houses, or either they're working in one other restaurant as a cashier or in a shop. So they didn't have any experience about running a business. And obviously we needed to start with capacitating them. And that is what happened. And now they're successful. We are almost 9 years down the road. They survived COVID. Some of the other privately owned restaurants had to close, but they, just through capacitating the community, they survived COVID. They're actually doing extremely well. We will host the standing committee on the 17th visiting this project. We have one lady there. She's a very strong lady. We talked about demographics earlier. The chair lady of the trust is Lucretia Jordan, and obviously supported by other trustees. They're going very strong. They, when we inherited the project, they were about 96,000 Rand in the red.
Okay.
We supported them to get out of the red. So they are very successful, and 42 households benefit.
That's incredible.
42 households benefit
Oh.
from this project. And obviously it is linked to the penguins. It's a tourist attraction, the penguin colony there. And also interesting, and this is also building relationships. They understand that without the penguins, their business will fail.
So they
And
care
they
for the
have
penguins.
they've become ambassadors for us there. About 2 years ago, they did a penguin song with some of the there's a lot of local skills around and people willing to assist. So we have Fraser Barry, I think is well known. He's an artist locally staying in Kleinmond. We have an animator staying in Pringle Bay, and
cool.
they came on board, and the kids from the area, they did the penguin song. And this song is played all over.
Epic.
And about a month ago, Lucretia Jordan was actually interviewed on radio.
Oh, amazing.
And she was talking about the penguins and the importance of the penguins that is actually sustaining that whole community.
Wow,
So,
that's amazing.
yeah.
But it's clearly more than that, because they got a 4.6 stars out of 5. They must be doing good food. Like,
Yeah.
objectively, they must be good at their jobs. That's such an amazing success story. But I'm sure there's some people watching saying, like, how could I do that in my community? And it's not an easy job. And so what comes to mind when I ask you what common obstacles face communities who are trying to take advantage of the blessings of the natural beauty? Maybe it's the penguins, maybe it's something else. The kind of obstacles that can get in the way of this sustainable development, this transformative entrepreneurship, this tourism.
One of the first things that I want to say is, like, obviously community dynamics.
Yeah,
You know?
got to be cool.
yeah.
Everybody got to be cool.
Yeah, community dynamics obviously is always a big challenge. Then obviously also economic disparities. Most of the people also don't have the educational background.
Right.
Then also infrastructure. They don't have the resources to start. And other challenges such as, for example, access to permits. So there's a lot of barriers. But I think sometimes we need to look past the barriers and look at what is it that you can use to make something work.
Absolutely. Jacques, why is it great to get more sustainable development just for the economy? I think we all know, it's great not to destroy the environment. It's great that things last for a long time. But from like many disadvantaged communities in South Africa want to do all those things, but they also want to have food on the table and more money now for their kids to have more money in future, get good educations and all that. Why is it good for the economy?
Well, I think firstly, as you say, it is about sustainability. So if we want to sustain our ability to generate income from tourism, we have to be inclusive. Sure. We have to involve the communities. We have to create opportunities for youth, given our youth unemployment rate. So I think that's non-negotiable. But also the world is rapidly changing.
Sure.
And a lot of our international source markets, whether it's Europe or North America, consumers are changing, and they are becoming consumers of sustainable products.
Huh.
You know,
Okay.
so we're seeing consumer behavior shifts that's impacting on the product. And if we do not implement and live up to sustainable practices, we're going to lose out on market share, basically.
For sure.
So I think, the world is rapidly changing and we have to adapt. So sustainability is really a non-negotiable.
The kinds of people who come to South Africa, and particularly the Cape, particularly Cape Town, particularly CapeNature Reserve, so they're the kinds of people for whom doing good by nature is important, being green conscious is important.
We're seeing it in demographic shifts. So something like 60% of all tourists, international tourists to the country, are under the age of 35.
Huh. Okay.
So, so that market.
Way more vegans.
Yeah, exactly. But these are younger people who, for them, it's a way of life. So we have to provide carbon neutral travel opportunities. We have to make sure that our businesses operate in ethical ways. But at the same time, we have this incredible biodiversity. We are world leaders when it comes to our stewardship of the natural environment. And so we do have incredible stories that we can share with the rest of the world.
Absolutely. I would love to hear more of that in the kind of like discourse, because I think South Africans are very good at being proud of excellent South Africans when it's the Springboks. But I'd also love to hear more stories of like, hey, did you know that we are really good at nature reserves? We are really good at our environment. It's not just that we happen to live in a place which has got an iconic floral kingdom. It's the fact that we're really good at looking after it also. But what you're both speaking about makes me think of innovation, specifically because, as you say, there are many younger people coming now. There are different kinds of people with different desires for the kinds of holidays that they want and the tourism experiences they want. There must be a lot of innovative practice happening. And I imagine that both in communities to find creative ways to create tourism opportunities for people, but also from a government policy perspective to support innovation, there must be a real drive to do that.
If I think now the digital platform, the restaurant, for example, they use it now to advertise the business, to advertise specials. So obviously the digital platform is a way. Then the other way that I think, and I'm thinking about my colleagues, Natanya's work, e-learning. We've got all these videos that teachers can go online and they can access these videos and get all the information about why must we save water. So that is just two examples that I can think of at this point.
Yeah, and I really like what you say, because so often a big part of teaching people is teaching the teachers, because there's so much new information all the time, and you can't expect a teacher to read every single newspaper every single day all the time and the scientific research papers. So you've got to give teachers the opportunity also to gain new knowledge and to share it. But yeah, tell me a little bit about supporting innovation from a government perspective, Jacques.
So I think the first strategy is really to identify those areas within tourism where we're seeing rapid growth, such as adventure tourism, and then seeing how do we work with communities, for example, through eco-guide training programs, to empower them to be able to take up opportunities in the adventure tourism space, for example. So we have, for example, invested in the training of culture and nature site guides at Cradle of Human Culture sites in the Vescas. We're currently doing a program around training marine guide tourists in Hermanus and Mossel Bay. So it's really about responding to market opportunities and then allowing youth and women in particular to be able to access those opportunities. And then absolutely I agree that it's also about using technology, using the opportunities around new technology and the role that new technology plays in tourism to build new skills, but also to use platforms to empower communities through online training programs, and also just being able to use technology to tell the stories of their communities and share what makes their communities such special places.
Absolutely. I want to hear more about the training of these guides, Cradle of Human Culture, the marine guides. It sounds really interesting.
So all the work that we do accredited training programs, which is firstly very important, so that guides then have the qualifications that allow them to register and practice as legal tourist guides. So that's quite important for us. We realize that we have to invest, particularly in the youth, so that they are able to access the opportunities. And some of it's basic stuff, like training people on customer service standards, how to service the needs of international and domestic tourists.
Wonderful, Jacques. And I want to close with returning to this specific World Tourism Month in 2024 and thinking about in this exact moment, in this year, with what is happening in South Africa and the world, climate change, politics, continuing recovery from COVID, pickups in local and international tourism, all the wonderful work you guys have spoken about, and the theme being tourism and peace, is what is the kind of like one focus or one message that you personally really want everybody to hear in this moment about World Tourism Month? Edith, starting with you.
Oh, you're putting me on.
Or
the spot.
Jacques, if Jacques is ready.
Are you ready?
So, I mentioned it before. I think inclusivity and sustainability are so important to the future of our tourism industry in this province. So we really need to focus on that. We cannot grow a tourism industry where communities do not benefit.
Sure.
We have to guard against over-tourism. We have to ensure that we also look after priority groups, women, the elderly, youth, and create opportunities for them to prosper.
Absolutely.
From my side, I want to link to the inclusivity is also custodianship.
Sure.
And you can only appreciate and take care if you are feeling included, and if you feel that there's a reason why I must take ownership, I must take care of this because it actually sustains me. And I think that is the message. It's about inclusivity, custodianship, ownership, and appreciation.
About
because
how
it sustains us financially.
as I was about to say, it's a relationship, and you're feeling rewarded, included, validated, affirmed, and benefited as you are doing work. Thank you so much to the both of you in this very, very important moment of World Tourism Month. Thank you, and thank you for watching / listening to this episode of Green Noise, a Cape Nature podcast.